Brad always calls those walk-up videos. Of course, I'm already here, so I didn't need to walk up. But he likes to do that. He had asked me to find some a while back, and I found two, and the other was more appropriate for that message, so I used this one today. I kind of liked it. Well, the title of my sermon is, Where Your Heart Clings, There Is Your God. And I was reading a book that was required for the lay servant training. And I was dubious about the training from the start because they say you had to come at 8 in the morning and stay till 7 at night. And I'm like, all day? In Stronghurst? I've been to Stronghurst. There's not much to do at Stronghurst. And I was mostly worried about food because there's not much food in Stronghurst either. There's only one little restaurant that's only open. And so I thought I would bring lots of food. I was going to treat it like my own potluck. And I was going to bring enough for 50. But it happened to occur on the one day of the year that we had snow, which was the Saturday that Mom and Winifred were in Smithshire hoping to go to Monmouth for their craft show and sell pecans, and Martha sell her aprons that she does for missions. And of course, nobody came to the craft show. They couldn't leave Smithshire, and they called off the training, so I didn't have to go. So I'm going to have to go again in February, and this time to Galesburg. And I'm still going to bring a lot of food. But the book assigned, which I had read before it, was by a bishop of the United Methodist Church, and he talked about this concept of what's your God. And basically, this quote is from Martin Luther, which I'm going to read in a bit, but he said it's kind of whatever your priority is, that's your God. You know, if success is your priority, if that's what you can think about, if grabbing money is your priority, if chasing after anything, no matter what it is in life, if that's what you do, if that's your priority, then that's your God. You know, that's more your God than God. And so that's what he means by that. And okay, angry Moses slide. The first one of the 10 commandments was, "Thou shalt have no other God before me." And then Moses went off, and when he came back, they were worshiping idols. And so, we kind of think that Moses brought that down, he straightened them all out, and the idol side, please. We don't have golden calves anymore, and we don't have people worshiping, and so we're kind of all done with that. There are no more idols. There's just God. We can concentrate on God. We don't have God. Other gods and foolish stuff. And part of what Moses came back and reading Exodus 32, verse 28, he got the Levites together who were with him, and then he killed off 3,000 of the other Hebrews they brought out of Egypt because they were worshiping the wrong gods. So it was pretty violent time back there. And we kind of think that's all back then, and now we don't have gods. But as the bishop's book I was reading was saying, we invent gods, and we make gods, and we make our own gods, and it's not our real God. So in Martin Luther, this is Martin Luther, the famous Catholic who started the Lutheran Church and Protestant Reformation. And on Time magazine in 1967, it was the 450th year since he had tacked his 95 Theses to the wall. And they put him on the cover of Time, you know. And so, which used to be a big deal. If you're really young, you don't know what Time is unless you found a digital subscription, but it used to be a big deal. And so he was on the cover of Time, and I'm going to read the quote that the sermon comes from. The simple meaning of this commandment is, you shall worship me alone as your God. What do these words mean, and how are they to be understood? What is it to have a God? Or what is God? The answer, a God is that to which we look for all good and where we resort for help in every time of need. To have a God is simply to trust and believe in one with our whole heart. As I have often said, the confidence and faith of your heart alone make both God and an idol. And if your faith and confidence are right, then likewise your God is the true God. On the other hand, if your confidence is false, if it is wrong, then you have not the true God. For the two, faith and God, have an inevitable connection. Now I say, whatever your heart clings to and confides in, that is really your God. Okay, so that's Martin Luther's translated words. So we trust the translator that they're pretty accurate. And so it occurred to me that in today, more people know Christianity, not from churches like ours, but from the televangelists and the famous media Christians and the mega churches. And then you see, you see that like the televangelists have like $70 billion in assets, that the one televangelist had quite a lot of controversy because he had bought a $46 million private jet that the people who preach prosperity seem to only mostly bring prosperity to themselves. And so I tend to think that these people who are most associated with Christians, who are most known to the rest of us in America as Christians, maybe have the wrong idol as their God. And I think it's a God of their own making, and I'm quite skeptical of it. And so I do think in America today, sometimes we equate financial success with spiritual success, and I don't think it's ever says that in the New Testament. So anyway, in this past few years, I decided to foolishly write a book about kind of like God and politics, So I had said today in a quote I put on Facebook that surely by this time next year, I will manage to offend everybody I know. And I'm pretty good at it anyway, but I probably will have managed that. And the person who was most offended was my son, because I made him read it. And he's an English teacher, and he had a lot of corrections, and in fact, he had these comments, a little slides, just like, with his red marker. And every so often he put the word dude. And so when we finally got together, he explained his comments. I said, what's this dude mean? He said, man, that is where you are so off in some other world that it is, you got to pull yourself back. I said, oh. But one of the things he pointed out, I'd written a chapter about creed, but he says, but it doesn't have a creed. You don't really have a creed. And I said, okay, I'll do one. So, this is Alex and I walking through the woods, and we got a chance to do that this fall. It was a wonderful day, My sister-in-law and brother-in-law live in Alaska, and they live in a place near Glacier Bay called Gustavus. In southeast Alaska, it's cloudy and it rains a lot, but they take a lot of pictures, and all their pictures are sunny and bright. And they said, well, I know it's kind of deceiving, but we don't ever take pictures when it's cloudy and raining, which is 70% of the time. We just rush out when it's sunny and bright. And, it looks like if you would go there, it would always be sunny and bright. Well, this was one of the sunny and bright fall days, and it was wonderful, but that isn't the way it is all the time. So now I'm going to read this creed, and it's on the slide, so if I drop my pages, I don't screw up. To honor God is to seek God. And to seek God with all my faculties and with all my energy, to seek union and connection with my soul with God's desire. To live in this world in harmony and to be filled with love of all life in my world. It is God's creation, and it is good. To radiate praise for Jesus, Spirit, and Creator. You see, because I believe, if you're sincere in following Jesus' two greatest commandments, first to seek God and then to love others, love God's world, then you must seek truth. Because surely seeking God is seeking truth. And if you're unwilling to seek the truth, then I think you're unwilling to seek God. And it's not easy to seek the truth. It's a lot easier to not seek the truth. I mean, ever since my hamstring injury, which you can see is much better, I'm not hobbling like Chester. I said that was quite amusing to people, that I was like Chester from Gunsmoke, but only a few people were old enough to remember Gunsmoke in Chester. But I haven't weighed myself, because I'm not walking, I'm not going to the gym, and it's Christmas, and I'm not weighing myself. And I don't know, it's like looking in the mirror. I think I'm much better looking until I look in the mirror and see a picture of myself. And so sometimes, we prefer to hide from the truth. So, if you don't seek God, then you can't serve God. Because if you don't seek God's will, whatever you're doing isn't necessarily going to be aligned up with serving God. So it doesn't mean you're not doing anything good. You might be doing lots of good. It just simply means your worship isn't what God would have you be. God is not your first priority. You have managed to put an idol in place of the true God. And therefore, all you do will be less than what it should be. Doesn't mean it's not good. I could come here and make coffee and then make it good every Sunday morning. I think it's good. Suits me. But, and I could say that's serving God. But in a lot of ways, it's serving me. So I make sure there's a decent cup of coffee here every Sunday morning. So sometimes some of the things we do that we say are serving God are kind of serving ourselves. And sometimes they're not really God's will is nor my will. It doesn't really suit what God would have us do. It suits my prejudice or my preferences. And I always thought the other day, the thought occurred to me that if when this life is over and you're going to meet God face to face, do you really want to go up and say, I used to go to church. I used to really like that congregation. But then, so-and-so, they moved that Christmas decoration where it shouldn't have been. And I've never been back since. Now, is that what you want to say? Is that serving God? Does that mean forgiving? We all have that, they just didn't do that the way I wanted to, and now I'm mad. I'm never going to come back. I'm not going to do that. So you must seek truth. And I think we must seek truth in all things. And I think the fact that we do not seek truth is why our politics and our government is so dysfunctional. And sometimes, truth doesn't mean to be a harsh truth. Truth doesn't mean to be a harsh truth. You don't need to be a stern person who lays down the law, with a strict rod. Sometimes truth is just in a loving way saying, it probably would be better if the next time you turned on the sound system before you started singing, because nobody could hear you. Or if when I go home after doing these things, my mother-in-law will tell me, I didn't understand a word you said. And I realized that I probably don't speak very distinctly, and I should practice on that. I should try to get better. And so I do practice on that, but I don't always get better. So sometimes we have lots of reasons why we don't tell the truth. We may just find it more comfortable to stay walled in our own prejudices. We may find it's more easy not to really try a new thing. And sometimes we just don't want to rock the boat. It's a lot easier just not to tell a person the truth sometimes. But that attitude, whether it's in church or in government or in our own families, that attitude isn't really going to change anything. It isn't doing anything for the better. And, we need to learn how to be loving and honest. So we refuse to face facts in budgets in our government. We refuse to face facts about people's lives. And we don't stomp and try to, it's these fellows, achieve a partisan gain. Their goal isn't to help people. Their goal is to have power. And they won't compromise hoping that they'll get more power. But that's their only goal. And I think if we were really honest in the Illinois Great Rivers Conference, we haven't entered in for. I mean, the Methodist Church probably should apologize for prohibition. We were a big factor in getting prohibition passed, but it didn't work out very well. We argue against lotteries, but we don't succeed. I seem to continue to want to fund the government on lotteries. And I think, if we were honest, from our pulpits and our Bible studies and our mission projects, our Sunday schools and men's and women's group, we really just should be demanding truth. That we should face the truth of our budget crisis. We should face the truth of funding and taxes and demand our politicians do that or not reelected. But it's much easier just not to rock the boat. Now, we claim to be patriots, and we claim to care, and we claim to honor these veterans, but our military service is now reduced to a very handful of professional warriors who are sent back to serve in Afghanistan and Iraq and now Syria, time and time again. And I, of course, as a person of the Vietnam era, had a draft number. I had a very low draft number, and I would have been drafted, except I was too young. I was in college, and they quit drafting before I was out. But it focused my attention on the fact that I was going to be drafted. So I thought about that. And so when I was young and had a draft number, I didn't think the draft was all that great an idea. But on the other hand, they made it fair. By the end, they made it fair. It was a lottery. Everybody was going to serve. And I had to acknowledge that there's something about fairness. But what it did, it brought home the decisions of who to send to war to every family and every young person. And now we pretend that we don't have to pay for these. That people aren't going to suffer. They're not going to have casualties. They're not going to come back. And even after they're away from the tours, suffer from the casualties of war. And we know that the suicide rate of our former veterans is really high. So it's easier. It's easier just to fly the flag and sing songs at Veterans Day. It's easier not to see the truth. Why did we go to war? Why should we go to war? What good will it do? What can we do? A lot of people want to say, oh, our military can solve all problems. But, a war can only solve one problem. It can go in and tear things up, and we can be good at it, but it can't build a better world. So, we have lied to ourselves before, or tried. Back in an earlier era, the Methodist Church split. It split completely apart. It split completely apart because the Southern Methodists thought that slavery was okay. It was in the Bible. But the Northern Methodists, they were kind of more abolitionists. They weren't ardent abolitionists as much as maybe the Congregationalists, but they were abolitionists, and they thought it was wrong. And since we couldn't worship God with two different sides, the church split. And honestly, just listening to the people at conference and listening to the people who are our leaders talk about the other people at conference, international conference, our church may split again. It's not unlikely that our church will split over the issues of homosexuality. The Southern and International Methodists don't agree with the Northeastern and Western Methodists, and I don't know that we can reach a compromise. I think it will split again. I think it's always surprising that Christian churches and Christian people who, when you meet them, on the whole, are very loving and wonderful people and can do great work together, can't seem to get along together over certain issues. And once they make it an issue, then they split, I always tell the example that when we first came to this church, the Craigmonts were here, but they didn't send their kids to school at Elwood, even though it was a wonderful school. They homeschooled their kids. So then they had this network of homeschoolers from around the area who did things together. And so we met one of the kids of one of the families of the homeschool, and they lived west of here, and they had once gone to church. They left that church. They gone to another church, and they left that church. And now they were down to these two brothers were having church in their own house. Because apparently they could agree with nobody's doctrine or philosophy except their own. And so here, it's just two brothers and their families, and they were having church service, but the girls can't speak in their church service, and so the sisters would have to write notes of what hymns they wanted to sing and pass it to their brother, because only the boys could say that they wanted to sing a certain song. And I think that sometimes we limit what we think we can be, or who we can be with, to the point where we can only get along with ourselves. Well, anyway, so it was a trying time before the Civil War, and there was much emotion, and there was much writing, and there was a lot of false promises. There was a lot of people lying to themselves, because the Southerners believed that it would be easy, and that they were so much more valorous and chivalrous that surely one of their soldiers was worth 10, and the North people would not care. But in spite of some good warnings by a few leaders of how terrible this would be and how long it would last and how much it would cost, they didn't believe it, and they went to war. And they went to war, and in a war which 650,000 people were killed or had casualties, and in those days, pretty much any wound is going to result eventually in your death. And so they had this war. Our churches split, and then war ended, and we won the war, and we tended to, now the Southern people, they were reunited. People who had been Confederate generals became U.S. senators and ambassadors, and and kind of got to, okay, we ended slavery, that's all over, it's all good. But we didn't end racism, and we didn't end discrimination, and that's continued on for work. Got even worse for people of color, and finally we're still dealing with it. And so we didn't solve a lot of problems in war, but we certainly had a great war, and it brought in a lot of people, and it brought a lot of suffrage. And so I have heard and read such extreme statements in the last few years. I haven't heard and read such extreme statements except when I read Civil War history, and people made such outlandish comments. So I would urge us to seek truth and not seek war in our own age, but it didn't happen in the 1860s. Well, earlier this year, Peggy Glucheski, who's the minister in Smithshire, Kirkwood, had read a poem, told the story behind the poem at a women's group in Smithshire, which Winifred and Mom both attended, with about as many people as you have here, probably fewer. And so she read this, and then she did it again for a meeting of the Spoon River District that I went to with Brad and Debbie, and I was pretty impressed. I had heard the hymn, Carol. I had not heard all of the poem, and I hadn't heard the story behind it. And I got to researching it, and I found out that every time somebody's going to read the whole poem that this poet had written, it's very famous, Longfellow. In fact, isn't that the answer to every question in the Scholastic Bowl? If you don't know it's about a poet, just say Longfellow. Yeah, I've always had these rules about Scholastic Bowl. They ask you a question, you don't know it's about a poet, just say Longfellow, probably right. So Longfellow wrote this poem, but it's like you never sing or hear the verses of the poem. They're in between, because he's mad at the South. He's angry with the South. And after the Civil War, it became we were supposed to count, the lost cause is a denial of the reality of the war. First, the war wasn't about slavery and many other things. So you can't ever read this poem without somebody saying, well, his wife had got caught on fire. She was doing something with candles. This is in 1861, I believe. And he caught her clothes on fire, and he tried to put her out. And he ended up, that's why he grew the beard. His face was so disfigured from this fire trying to put her out, that she had died a few days later, and he was disfigured the rest of his life, and so he grew the beard. And so he lost his wife. And then his son, who had run off, his oldest son had joined the army, and we got sick, but then was rejoined, and he was injured in a battle of Mine Run in 1863, November 27, 1863. It's kind of a little known, not very consequential engagement that the forces of Robert E. Lee and George Meade engaged in a few months after Gettysburg. But he was wounded, severely wounded. And so they always explain his emotion in this poem, apparently because we're not supposed to blame, we're supposed to be reunified. Although I know that Ken Burns there's this one quote from read about Confederate soldier after surrendered at Appomattox says, well, you may forgive us, but I won't be forgiven, which is an attitude a lot of us have. And so I think the Southern Apologist is a reason why we can't have this poem just read without them explaining all this tragedy he was probably under before he wrote the poem. And so, since I sometimes am not articulate, and since I'm not heard, I decided to record this in the quiet of my own home, and Alex is going to play it, and you'll hear all the verses of the poem, and then I will sing the carol that you've often heard afterwards, probably not as well as Burl Ives did.
Steve, we need the password.
Oh, the password to my user, so everybody knows, is servant in small letters. See, they made us lay witness people who used to be lay speakers become lay servants. It was decided that we were blowing our stats off too much in these churches and not listening enough and not serving enough. So they made change our name to lay servants so that we would first serve before we spoke. Are we ready? Okay, now we see. Change to the church slide too. Not playing? And see, this is why Steve usually runs back and forth. I don't seem to have any sound in my mic either. Did you turn me off?
We're irrational in our fears. So I thought I would record. This morning I heard on NPR that they were guarding churches in France because they were afraid of Christmas Day attacks. And this is not the first time in history where people have been fearful. There seems to be turmoil. In fact, we are probably at a point in history that's better than any other point in history, yet people want to be afraid. And they have reason to be at times, but we have a reason to be irrational or irrational in our fears. So I thought I would record this poem by Longfellow. Peggy Kluczewski had brought it up to my mother and mother-in-law's United Methodist Women Group, and then had brought the story to us at a meeting at the Spoon River District. And it's a very moving and wonderful story behind the poem, but I'm just going to read the poem and this thought for Christmas Day. I heard the bells on Christmas Day, their old familiar carols play, and wild and sweet the words repeat, of peace on earth, goodwill to men. I thought how as the day had come, the belfries of old Christendom had rolled along the unbroken song of peace on earth, goodwill to men. Till ringing, swinging on its way, the world revolved from night to day. A voice, a chime, a chant sublime, of peace on earth, goodwill to men. Then from each black, accursed mouth, the cannon thundered in the south, and with the sound the carols drowned, of peace on earth, goodwill to men. It was as if an earthquake rent the harsh stones of a continent, and made forlorn the households born, of peace on earth, goodwill to men. And in despair I bowed my head. There is no peace on earth, I said, for hate is strong and mocks the song of peace on earth, goodwill to men. Then pealed the bells more loud and deep. God is not dead, nor doth he sleep. The wrong shall fail, the right prevail, with peace on earth, goodwill to men. I heard the bells bells on Christmas Day, their old familiar carols play. And wild and sweet the words repeat of peace on earth, goodwill to men. And in despair I bowed my head. There is no peace on earth, I said, for hate is strong and mocks the song of peace on earth, goodwill to men. Then pealed the bells more loud and deep. God is not dead, nor doth he sleep. The wrong shall fail, the right prevail. A peace on earth, goodwill to men. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, I didn't need to tell the whole story. I told it, yeah. Okay, so as we move forward into this year, and I look forward to a wonderful year, our church has been full. It's not today, but it's been very full. And we have been growing, and we have been working together. Sometimes we're kind of like the birds. The left hand doesn't always know what the right hand is doing, but mostly if everybody has goodwill towards doing it, it has all worked out. And I look forward to this congregation. We have a new youth minister in place. We have the potential to be a really growing church that reaches people and touches their spirits. And I hope that's what we do in this coming year. I think we should only do so if we seek God, and if we seek God, we are seeking truth. And I think we should demand truth in a loving and very generous way. And we should show our generosity to each other in this community of faith. But we should not allow ourselves to hide or cloak our resentments or prejudices, because doing so and wallowing in our ignorance is simply immoral, whether it's in our daily lives, or in our church life, or in our community lives. This is really not the mission Jesus gave us to follow, to just be comfortable, to do what we want to do. Jesus gave us a mission to seek God, to seek God's will, and then to bring that will and love to the world. And let's hope we can do so this coming year. Thank you. We're going to get back to my readjusted schedule here. Yes, we have an offering. And I think never have, once since I was speaker, have I forgotten to do the offering. Although my first place speaker at Tampa Smithshire, I did, and the treasurer was about to kill me. But she got my attention when we took the offering, so we'll take up the offering. Let there be peace on earth. coming. I hope that you didn't get too burned out on the Davis family this morning, but when they tell you you have to get your own ushers and liturgists and stuff like that, it's a lot easier to ask your own family instead of prevail on them. So, may the Lord bless you as you have blessed this church and each other. May you go back and in your families you find love, peace, and harmony. And may you then take what is in your soul and bring it to the world. And may we do so in every day for the next coming rest of our lives. Amen.